Alibaba just released their Investor Day presentation materials, and guys, it's a lot of information. This is a 2-day event with 5 different presentation decks and hundreds of slides, but you know somebody who's crazy enough to go through it all and summarize it for you. You're watching More Money, let's get it. What's going on, guys? All right, so Alibaba just released 5 presentation decks on its Investor Day, and I'm slowly working through them and giving you these first looks as I go through them. So the first area that I'm gonna go right after is the China retail marketplace segment. This is the area where we saw that 3% year-over-year growth and we saw additional competition. The way that they're explaining this segment with their presentation decks is through 4 sub-segments. And so we'll go through all of those. In this particular video, we'll go through the first sub-segment, and then I'll make additional short video parts to cover the other ones. And of course, the very first area that they're gonna go after is the area that everyone is having questions about, which is the China commerce retail segment. What does the competitive landscape look like, and what are they doing to address it? And so that's what they're gonna cover off in this first sub-segment, which we're gonna cover in this video. And once again, just a reminder, guys, that the customer management revenue in the last quarter grew at 3% year over year. And remember that they mentioned that it was primarily due to single-digit physical goods gross market value growth that resulted from slowing market conditions, and they were impacted by more players in the China e-commerce market. And going into their first chart, you can see that they still are growing with 946 million mobile monthly active users. That's the chart on the left, and 863 million annual active customers. That's the chart on the right. But the one thing that I do want to point out to you is when we just look at the chart on the left, the mobile active users, if you notice, the active user growth is actually slowing. So the 2019 growth from 666 million to 785 million actually grew by 17.9%. The following year, in 2020, it grew by 12.2%, and in 2021, it grew by 7.6%. So it's very clear that the growth is slowing. Now, there's no shaking your fingers at 8% growth year over year, but I just need to point out that once again, this is what we were expecting from the beginning, and what I was talking about when I did the Q2 review, that this segment is going to start to slow, and so that's what we have to build into our expectations. Now, with the annual active customers, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag. In Q2 of 2020, they grew by 15.3%. In Q2 of 2021, it of course declined down to 9.2%, which would have been your COVID impacts. And then in Q2 of 2022, it grew by 14%. So a little bit more of a mixed bag with the annual number of customers. But that being the case, the real question that a lot of us have is, what is this market looking like? Like, I've made quite a few videos talking about potential impacts from COVID lockdowns. I was talking about the power shortages, regulations, even stronger competition in the China online marketplaces. So there's a lot of questions that people have. And so when I actually did my preview for the Investor Day, I'm pretty sure somebody was actually watching that video because they almost made their presentation deck to address all of the concerns that I had in that area. So when we move on to their next slide, you can see in the market uncertainties, they're addressing the issues that I was sort of talking about. So they're really saying that the impact of COVID on consumption growth and the global supply chain challenges and the regulatory issues are all just short-term in nature. And I think when they think about global supply chain challenges, they're probably lumping in the power crisis there as well. I've been told by people that the power situation is pretty much resolved, so that's why they probably didn't even include it on this chart. But one thing that concerns me is if you go over to the right of that chart, when you see the medium to long-term market uncertainties, you can see that I've highlighted that they put market competition right there on the bottom right. And what that really tells me is the fact that they're hinting to us that they're not really sure what the market's going to look like in the medium to long term with respect to their competitors. And so that's something that we need to be aware of. With respect to COVID, I think that the Chinese government really needs to embrace that COVID is endemic and not a pandemic. We're always going to have it in society. The important thing is that vaccines and therapeutics are now globally available. So really now is the time to figure out how to get it to your population in the fastest and easiest way possible. Now, going back to the competitive landscape, yes, more competition will lead to slower revenue growth. So they've largely told us that most of the concerns that we have are largely short-term in nature, and I do agree with that. The one concern that they didn't touch on was the real estate situation that's happening in China and how that could impact consumption. I think the reason why they're not touching on that is because they also don't know. So I understand why they would leave that one out. It's largely speculation, and they don't want to get on the bad side of any regulators who's currently dealing with that right now. So with respect to competitiveness, I think what they really need to do is show us that they're willing to compete. And I think when you move into the next slide, they actually do a really good job of that, because here they're showing to us what the consumer segment is. And what they've really done is that they've grouped their customers by age category. So they're essentially saying that they've already achieved population penetration of 90% of the young customers. They're telling us that their core customers are the 25 to 44-year-old customer base, which makes sense. That's the same thing here in North America. And what they're telling us is that they have a huge opportunity with those who are aged 45 and above. And since China is an aging population, you want to be able to make your online marketplaces something that's popular with the older generation, because as the population continues to age, you're just going to have more and more consumers in those higher age brackets. And they even dug deeper and gave us more information onto each cohort of their customer life cycle. So what they're telling us with their young customers is that they quickly evolve into core customers within 4 or 5 years. They know exactly what products they're buying. So, the young customers are typically focused on the cosmetics and personal care, consumer electronics, and books. And then as they get older, they're focusing more on home decor, auto, and alcoholic beverages. So in other words, basically what they're saying is that we like to focus on our beauty and reading, and then when we get older, we like to decorate our home, buy cars, and drink ourselves to sleep. Perfect. But all kidding aside, I like that they showed us this slide, because what they're really doing is they're showing us when the customers are younger, they're almost in an incubation status, and Alibaba is looking at them not just for that one transaction, but how can Alibaba continue to get them to stick with the brand to make transactions as time goes on. Now with the core customers, the strategy is a little bit different, as you'll see from this slide. It looks like the strategy here really is to maintain stickiness through increased paid memberships. So that's really what they're saying here with their growth of the 88 VIP memberships. And it looks like once people do join these membership programs, they have a renewal rate of 80%. So they're really sticking around. And when they are in the membership program, they're actually spending more money on the platform, because you're seeing an ARPU increase of 30% after joining. And you can see that the number of people that joined the membership program actually grew 70% year over year, from 30 million to 50 million. And it looks like they're targeting 100 million in the future. I'm assuming within the next year or two. Now, why does this strategy matter? Well, I think it matters because of what's already been shown to work. In North America, Amazon launched their Prime service. And what that really did was, I don't think they actually made money on Prime. In fact, I don't think they did at all. But what it did do was it increased the number of transactions that people were doing because they didn't have to pay delivery fees. And I know that was exactly my behavior as well on Amazon. Once I didn't have to pay for the delivery, I actually ended up buying more products myself. And you can see the success of that idea, because even retailers like Best Buy are now launching their subscription models to mimic the success that Amazon has had. So I like that Alibaba is on top of this. They already hit a pretty significant milestone with 50 million people on the subscription service. And I really think that they'll hit that 100 million within the next couple years. So moving on to the biggest opportunity, and I believe it's the most important opportunity, the aged 45 and plus consumer. Now, what they're telling us is that the older consumers are a rapidly growing consumer group with high price sensitivity. So they're a different group of consumers than the other two segments. And this group of consumers is growing really fast at 35% year over year. So what exactly are they buying, and what appeals to them to allow this consumer segment to grow faster? Well, it looks like they're really looking for value for money products. So toilet papers, trash bags, groceries, slippers, staple food products, bedding, and they're really interested in value for money type programs. So how can we allow them to save money by using the online platforms? And I think that really bodes well to Alibaba's bigger strategy, which is the direct to consumer strategy, which they do talk about in subsequent presentations. But I think this is the market where you really win on that, especially the direct-to-consumer grocery segment that they have with Fresh Hippo. I think you can really win here. So I really like that they segmented the age groups and they're specifically targeting them individually. So what is my real takeaway of this first segment from their presentation? Well, it tells me that they're really focused on the customer and they're giving us a lot of information. They're telling us that they're looking at the customer from a customer life cycle perspective, and then they're going to target them specifically based on what they're looking for at that life cycle. That's of course a really good strategy. But what it also tells us is that they have admitted to us that there is a segment that has been underserved, which is the 45-year-old plus segment, and it's a segment that they're going to be going after. I think the most important thing is, as you get more rural areas to get onto the internet and start using the Alibaba platform, that's an area where you can probably get more and more of these 45 plus people as well. So far, from what I'm actually seeing, I like it. They did address some of the concerns. Obviously, they didn't address the real estate concern, which is a big concern of mine. Also, I would like to know more of like what their competition is doing, but I don't think they're going to tell us that in their Investor Day presentation. But at least the best that they can do is tell us exactly what they're doing, and then we can look at the competition and see how the competition is reacting as well. And so I'll cover all of that in this next line of video series. Now that is it for now, but I will see you in part 2 of this first look, which you can get to right here once it's available. And if it's not available yet, guys, I think it's very important for you to look at the preview for the Investor Day and all of the concerns that I had. You can get to that video right here.